Marvel had a brief dark period with video games when everything had to be a movie tie-in. The X-Men and Fantastic Four were basically banned from video games because of Fox, and most people remember Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, but it did happen to LEGO too. LEGO Marvel Avengers, just 3 nouns on top of each other for that title, came out in 2016, was made to capitalize on the second Avengers movie, Age of Ultron, by adapting pretty much all of the movie, plus the first Avengers movie, and several bits and pieces from other MCU movies, Captain America the First Avenger and its sequel, Captain America the Winter Soldier, Iron Man 3, Thor the Dark World, Ant-Man, and a few episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D, plus a character DLC for Captain America Civil War and some random comics loosely adapted for miscellaneous DLC, and of course was on every console known to man, the PS3, PS4, and Vita, Xbox 360 and One, the Wii U, 3DS, and PC, although weirdly this one didn't make it into the LEGO Marvel re-releases for the later consoles and Switch, almost certainly for its use of archival voice lines from the movie with exceptionally expensive actors, unlike the Warner properties where the rights belong to them anyways. LEGO Avengers feels a lot like an afterthought in almost every way, the most obvious being that it reads a lot like a ROM hack for LEGO Marvel in the open worlds. The layout of Manhattan is about 98% identical to the prior game. Same stupid hidden tunnel in Central Park, same weird little confusing parking garage, same Liberty Island, same Rikers Island. Avengers Tower is moved and redesigned a bit, and the X-Mansion is torn out in favor of an extremely boring S.H.I.E.L.D. base, but they had an asset and they used it. To be fair, the quests, races, and collectibles are shuffled around a lot, and there are a handful of new mini-hubs, the S.H.I.E.L.D. base, Malibu, Washington DC, Asgard, South Africa, Barton's Farm, and Sokovia, but each of these has like 5 side quests and maybe 15 collectibles and is about a 25th of the size of Manhattan, if that. The levels suffer this less, of course, as the story doesn't really resemble the priors in the slightest, but a lot of the characters are carried over pretty identically with only minor tweaks. Iron Man can now swap suits for extremely niche scenarios, Hulk looks more like Mark Ruffalo, Hawkeye and Black Widow are more important, kinda. There's an underwhelming familiarity to Avengers, more so than is already typical for these games. It's LEGO Marvel again, but with a more limited roster and archival audio of Robert Downey Jr. saying, that just happened. The levels are good, generally. The broadcasts of the Avengers are very well suited for the gameplay, and the Phase 2 movies getting little levels is cute, but they absolutely love interrupting the gameplay with lengthy bits of recreated scenes that often shoot the pacing in the foot. Even then, it's just kind of less interesting than the wacky original scenarios of the prior LEGO Marvel. As to be expected, there's a lot of powers going on once again. Guns and arrows shoot targets, arrows make poles for athletic characters to swing on, some arrows and guns can grapple things to pull them down, Hawkeye's sound arrow things can shatter glass, athletic characters can wall jump in certain spots and swing on poles, flight is everywhere and obviously useful, bombs break silver, lasers and fire melt gold and ice, the scanner reveals hidden objects, Captain America's shield activates switches, puts out fires and deflects lasers, and other shields and energy force fields can deflect lasers as well. Loki's ice beam freezes water, smart guys can hack panels, Iron Man repairs stuff, shield guys can open panels, Hydra guys can open panels, the Hulk can take selfies, and yeah. Electric guys can charge generators, fast guys can activate panels that have them run around and press a bunch of buttons at once, which is a very boring way to do super speed, but they also do move and build faster, which is kind of fun. Magic can lift stuff up, some magicians can mind control people, magicians plus also Ant-Man can move through vents, a few guys can dig, bigger strong guys can break cracked walls, big guys can rip out wall handles, invisible guys sneak past cameras, and some evil guys can use power cosmic to break black stuff. For some reason that includes Ultron, who's a man-made robot from Earth. Most of the characters that they gave the ability Power Cosmic don't really fit, but I guess you couldn't just say Dark Force because, you know, that's not a thing in Marvel. Whatever. There's also a very rare few team-up moves like Captain America and Thor together, which, you know, break stuff contextually. It's a lot of different keys to open a lot of different doors without too much interesting stuff that comes from it in this scenario. Not to say it's outright bad, I think the roster's pretty strong. They have nice condensed amounts of abilities for each character, and each character is usually useful in a lot of scenarios, but it does feel like it's kind of the same collection of abilities that we've seen for quite a while. LEGO Marvel looks decent at least. The likeness of the characters and actors are all pretty good, even if likely to blame for this game being kinda left behind. I like that most of the major characters get variants for each of the Avengers movies as they changed over time. Age of Ultron Hulk looks all gross and kinda grimy gray because that's what they're going for in that movie, for example. And I like that there's about 30 Iron Man suits with niche differences that all have their own putting on animations. In general, the characters are well animated as always, and the archival audio of some very good actors and all the other MCU actors is an enjoyable little addition to cutscenes. Like other direct archival audio games in the LEGO series though, Lord of the Rings and so on, the game does feel a little bit disjointed. The slapstick and comedy in cutscenes is sheerly visual and paired alongside pretty one-to-one recreations of movie scenes with Joss Whedon quips making everything a struggle to get into. But admittedly, the cast for these movies is good at what they do. The levels generally look quite good if the Age of Ultron ones are a bit washed out to match that movie's style, but there isn't an immense variety until the DLC. There's a lot of cities, some a little different than others, but not significantly so. It does get a little repetitive. As for the overworld, I mean, reusing New York is kind of lame in principle, especially as it was made generally less interesting with the X-Men erasure, but it is still a fairly good hub, and the new mini-hubs have some decent variety. The Asgard one is quite good, especially with all the yellow and the darkness and the big rainbow bridge and all the kind of ethereal, waterfally, rivery tunnels and candlelit coves and stuff. It looks really good. Most of these mini hubs are fairly mundane though, especially when it comes to the more dully colored ones like Africa and Sokovia, which are gray Age of Ultron worlds. There's a surprising amount of music from the movies too, but in really weird places. I mean, the cutscenes have it for obvious reasons, while levels have, generic action-y LEGO music that works well enough but isn't all that crazy. But then also for some reason when you're doing races in the overworld, which remain a fixture, the film score plays extraordinarily loud. Just overwhelmingly loud, drowns out all the dialogue, and it is kind of funny in a way to just be smashed with the Avengers theme, but might not have been the choice I would have gone with. LEGO Avengers has an incredibly bizarre structure, starting with the beginning of Age of Ultron, then going through the entirety of the Avengers, which itself has a brief flashback detour to do the First Avenger, then drops the Phase 2 levels as bonus levels, which you unlock halfway through the game, then finally loops back around to Age of Ultron. It has this whole weird looping flashback structure to kind of keep it relevant to the new movie and push in your face that this is an Age of Ultron game, as if the MCU isn't a serialized story that happens in a specific order. Also, the open world is severely kneecapped by not having the ability to change characters until you beat the game, which keeps you from unlocking many characters, which means that breaking the game before beating it functionally requires DLC. If you get all the character DLC packs, you can absolutely bend this game in half and start getting red bricks well before you're supposed to, but if you're not willing to pay up the $2 for the Villains DLC, then sorry bucko, you're waiting until you beat the game to get the ×2 multiplier. Starting at Chapter 2, the Avengers starts with Loki's return. The first part of the chapter starts off admittedly kinda rough, mostly because of Nick Fury, who's just a guy with a gun. Hawkeye is surprisingly great. His arrows blow up silver, melt gold, shoot targets, he can do the athletics stuff. He's one of the very few characters who breaks glass in the game. Nick Fury can activate shield panels and shoot people with a gun. And much of this level is just battering off Loki clones until Hawkeye is possessed, at which point it becomes the Maria Hill and this guy show. I don't even know if this guy's in the movie, and I just watched it. It's a brief puzzle and a car chase. This game's vehicle and other gimmick segments are extremely weak. It's like an element that they just did not want to put in this at all. There's essentially no thought in the car chase. You kind of just watch the scenery go by and shoot the cars as they keep coming at you. It really doesn't have like the flashiness of Jurassic World, which had equally mindless vehicle segments, but made up with them being cool set pieces. And it also doesn't have like the being actually challenging of like the Lego Star Wars 1 vehicle segment, which is a low bar. It's a low bar, but yeah, it's a fairly mundane start. Avengers unfortunately has a lot of that in the first half because this movie just has a lot of setup to get everyone caught up on the premise and that this is a crossover and get everyone to the places they need to be because they weren't really sure about how this whole serializing into giant payoff movie thing would work yet. Chapter 3 is the flashback to the First Avenger, so Chapter 4 is where Avengers actually starts, with a very boring non-Hulk Bruce Banner and Black Widow clean up the helicarrier mission. The propensity for filler in these games has been pretty high in the last few. The back half is pretty good though. Loki is a fun villain throughout the game in general. His trickster ability to clone himself means you're frequently fighting hordes of him or possessed civilians, which is a lot more unique than the kind of enemies you usually face in these games. And the outdoor restaurant is a nice setting. Iron Man and Captain America fighting Thor over custody of Loki feels like it should be cooler than it is, but one big thing in this game is QuickTime events. So many big fights are just reduced to QuickTime events. There's just not a lot going on. There's nothing creative. I don't know if this was like a Marvel mandate, but they have to be exactly like the movie, and therefore they have to be QuickTime events because the games don't play exactly like the movie. You end up kind of just wandering through the woods doing QuickTime events constantly with two characters who are genuinely cool and fun to use against an opponent who should be cool and fun to fight. I'm not sure why the boss fights in this series fell off so hard after the first couple games, beyond that they have the capability to do scenes more accurately by not having gameplay and just kind of fell into that trap. I like most of the helicarrier stuff after, at the very least. The little chase scene running away from the Hulk is pretty cool, even if it ends in another QuickTime event, and I think it has more going on visually than most of the first movie does in the other levels, mainly in the destroyed exterior section, which is semi-2D. Also, possessed Hawkeye is kind of a real boss. There's a lot of busy work between it all, but he actually needs to be shot back at, and the interior of the helicarrier leans and tilts a little, which is a pretty cool effect. The climax of the Avengers is weird, in part because it's Loki and the weird faceless aliens against the main cast. I like that the whole main cast is involved here and there, but Thor's big battle with Loki is reduced to another QuickTime event that makes the worst noise ever at the loudest volume a PS5 can output while you hold square. I have no idea why did they choose to make it sound like this. It sounds like something's going wrong, and also the icon makes it look like you're supposed to mash square, but you're supposed to hold it, so you'll probably be mashing square and just listening to this awful noise. And while Thor is doing this, player 2 is playing Defender, like flying around in circles and holding the shoot button to shoot down aliens, just to give them, something to do and look at while this QuickTime event goes on. The street and bridge after are kind of just ordinary Lego levels. There's a few cute moments mixed in. Iron Man gets to laser down a bunch of alien flying monster creatures. But it's all just a prelude to the real final level, which starts with the Hulk and Thor on the back of an alien flying monster thing, which is a cool set piece. Like, as far as it goes, this is the coolest thing that happens in this game, even if you do just run from one side of it to the other while fighting some basic enemies. And there's still some filler with cleaning out the bank of aliens, but I think the big problem is that Loki is beat up by the Hulk at the end of the movie, which means this ends on yet another QuickTime event. It's like the 7th QuickTime event involving Loki alone at this point in the game, and the first Avengers movie kind of just fizzles out and moves on to the Phase 2 levels. I suppose I should loop back to Chapter 3 before that though. The Captain America the First Avenger level. I actually really like these bite-sized single movie adaptations. The filler that plagues both of the Avengers movies is killed in favor of just hitting the highlights and the cool moments. Captain America and Bucky's raid on a Hydra base. It's really weird that it starts with taking out 3 identical turrets, but other than that, I like the laser shooting Gimp mini-boss in the chapter who needs to be distracted by one player for the other to approach. I like the base burning down towards the end, and I like most of the train set piece at the end. Train levels on top of and inside are usually pretty easy wins when it comes to winning me over. They're way more interesting than slightly destroyed New York streets. All in all, it's one of the movies that's going to be harder to adapt since it's a little less action-focused than the others, but it is a pretty cool adaptation. That same sentiment also extends for me to the Phase 2 bonus level stuff, mostly, all of which is unlocked after the first Avengers ends. Captain America the Winter Soldier starts with the raid on the boat, which is also a very unique set piece for the game, and features 2 mostly real boss fights against the Winter Soldier. The highway fight being a bit more puzzle-focused, destroying the bridge he's standing on while fighting goons, while the fight on the helicarrier with the Falcon allows a decent amount of freedom with his fight, and is just about punching the guy when he grabs the other player. It is a little mundane setting-wise until the very end when you're on the helicarrier, but I think it hits the highlights of the movie really well. Iron Man 3 is kind of weird because it's a good movie. Almost all of its action is concentrated in its finale, and in the first two segments, as far as this adaptation goes, Tony's beach house getting attacked and the small town getting attacked aren't bad or anything, but they are a little bit mundane. Each has a little something to it. In the beach house scene, you get to shoot down some helicopters the Mandarin sent, and in the diner, you get to fight the extremist zombies. But the house party is the real good stuff, and it's really well done. I like the suits flying in and out of the level and changing the scenario as it goes on, like knocking down some platform for you to use so you can progress. And Iron Man and War Machine are two of the best characters in the game. I mean, they fly, they shoot missiles, they shoot lasers, they do, like, basically everything. I mean, they're the same character as far as gameplay goes, but, you know, Iron Man 3, best movie in the whole franchise, and pretty good level. For whatever it's worth, the Thor the Dark World level is significantly better than the movie. Low bar, I know. The bizarre and mind-numbing movie largely takes place on Asgard, which immediately makes this the level with the most visual distinction by a mile, and it's really not even close. I'm not even entirely sure what's going on story-wise most of the time. I think I slept through most of this movie. My brother seems to think he did as well. But Asgard's old Nordic stylings are interesting and colorful. It's kind of a shame that the finale is just some gray outdoor area in Britain, which is like the most depressing place on Earth. But I do like some of the visuals that the evil elf wizard man pulls out, where he like grows big and he has the red kind of particle-y lasers. That stuff looks kind of cool. I wish we'd been lucky enough to get a Guardians of the Galaxy level or something. It's very nice to have a break from the general sterility of the MCU, even if through the lens of this awful movie. Avengers Age of Ultron is a pretty bad movie, which is more or less why it works as a game, even if the game gets more aggressive with its in-level cutscenes to kill the pace as much as possible. But the whole thing starting on it for the sake of tricking people into thinking that it's the center point of this game is a really weird idea. It is a pretty good intro level though. I like segmenting out all the heroes off into pairs and switching periodically to give everyone a little intro to their mechanics and personalities, while the back half of this level has that weird scrolling shooter thing going on again for one player while the other actually plays the game. Player 1 gets to go through this entire level section where they're doing all the usual Lego things, fighting and doing puzzles, and the other guy's just playing a scrolling shooter thing. It's a really weird decision for the first level of a game that's so focused on co-op, especially since Iron Man is literally not at all integral for the level advancing. It's pretty flagrant busy work for the second player, profitable busy work though, while the first does all the fun stuff in a burning castle. What a waste. It's not until level 8, or 11 if you count the bonus level, that Age of Ultron gets back on track, and it's not great. Tony's lab is a few puzzles to fill time, and the party section is kinda just a big room you do stuff in for a good while to fill time once again. Once Ultron is actually born, things improve some. I like how the level centers on rescuing individual characters to add to the roster so that you can continue to go on to save more. It gives a really nice flow and structure to the level that makes it feel like you're kind of getting born more powerful as you go along, and finally kicks off the return to Age of Ultron properly. Things really just keep going uphill from there. The Quicksilver fight where he and Scarlet Witch are initially evil is pretty decent. It's not like a fight, but I like that it always centers on getting him to grab Thor's hammer, which comes with some amusing animations as well, and Scarlet Witch sending everyone into their past memories is a really unique little segment, each a brief aside without a whole ton of gameplay, with some unique visual flares like Captain America's wartime ball and Black Widow's ballet school thing. I think it could have lingered on these a little bit longer, but I can understand keeping them limited in scope just so that, you know, you don't have to create a million assets for something that's in the game for 40 seconds. I mostly just think the ending to the level is weird with the Hulkbuster stuff. It's pretty clear they weren't sure what to do in the slightest given every other Avenger is elsewhere during this entire scene outside of Iron Man, and the scale of the combat, you know, two 10-foot tall monsters beating each other up, one of them a robot. Player 2 is stuck as a satellite in the sky, pressing buttons at certain times to drop gas on the Hulk when it's needed, or a cage, while the Hulkbuster player is effectively in an endless series of QuickTime events. Awesome. There's great visual recreations of the fight, as well as a few gags snuck in there, and honestly, it's actually quite cool. But for both players, it's immensely clunky and slow, and basically devoid of real gameplay in a very negative way. The whole Korea segment kinda sucks too. The motorcycle chase has the same only one character's important issue: have fun doing nothing on your bike, Black Widow. The train feels like a duller version of the Captain America 1 level, and the crash site is just an intersection in Korea. It's nice having Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, who are very different from the original main cast, if a little bit limited, but it's a lull between the big QuickTime event set piece and the big finale. The big build-up level on the flying city itself has some of the same problems. The Hulk wall scaling thing is pretty unique and interesting. I like that Black Widow's actually given stuff to do by riding on top of and jumping off of the Hulk to help him progress, but the obligatory save the civilians in a Slavic city street bits both feel a little flat, a problem with the movie too, but I think it'd help if the game somehow conveyed the city was flying in the air and had some more perilous segments because of that. It all feels like, you know, it's hard to tell that the city's actually flying unless you walk all the way to the edge where you can, you know, see it drop. Like, I don't really know how you would convey it because the city's not moving in a direction, it's just kind of in the air, but there should have been like maybe some platforming or something that would have been a little neat. Thankfully, the actual finale is pretty good. There's a bit of filler when it comes to the Iron Man part at the start, but I like how it comes full circle with the constantly changing perspectives between small groups of heroes mid-fight, bouncing back and forth between the groups as they do stuff to impede Ultron. It's yet another non-fight, but it's cool in context since Scarlet Witch is doing the fighting while everyone else assists, and the constant perspective and character switching is pretty exciting and interesting, and a little bit different from anything we've really seen before in the LEGO series. If I can say nothing else about the Age of Ultron levels, it's that it at least sandwiches all the mediocrity between great openings and endings. The DLC missions are quite the collection. Most of them are effectively non-canon stories just to have an excuse to do some LEGO Marvel silly one-off scenarios. The first, Masters of Evil, is a tiny little villain level with Baron Zemo. He was in Civil War, but this is like the comic one. The Black Knight, aka that guy who was played by Kit Harington in the Eternals and will never be in the MCU again. Melter and Radioactive Man, who you know, they're like laser beam shooting guys. These evil guys are just being evil in New York, but get two fairly good fights against Iron Man and Thor, which is more bosses than the entire main game. The level does feel a little bit cobbled together, but it's a fun little one-off. Classic Captain Marvel is a Captain Marvel adver level, not for the movie, but just for the character in general, who Marvel really wanted to make work at the time and still kinda does today, as she fights iconic villains Pound Cakes and Magnetron alongside Captain America, who has almost nothing to do in this level. It's perfectly fine. The rooftop section is decently unique, but takes away Captain Marvel's ability to fly arbitrarily, which feels a little like stupid. None of the involved characters interest me in the slightest, but it is a half-decent DLC level. Classic Black Panther is pretty cool. Wakanda's a very unique setting for the game, the futuristic blues match well with the oranges and golds and browns, and I like all the Panther themed decor. Plus, like in Masters of Evil, Black Panther gets two decent fights. Black Knight a more straightforward one, and Claw a simple puzzle boss, but one that asks you to dodge a fairly large variety of attacks during. The whole thing is pretty simple and sweet, both of the main characters are fun, another decent level. All New, All Different Doctor Strange is the most unique level in the game by far, and one of the more unique the LEGO series has had for a good while. An entirely asymmetric stage where one player is Doctor Strange, clearing out his sanctum of an evil wizard, while the other is in the dark dimension as Clea, distracting Dormammu. I love the idea and the contrast on both screens, especially as each player clears the path interdimensionally for the other, but it does lead to kind of boring downtimes for one player or the other, where there's rarely something happening on both sides as one player's inevitably going to finish up before the other and be stuck waiting for the other to make enough progress to get them to move forward. I'm sure it works a lot better in solo where you're not like stuck actively waiting and you're in charge of when you switch between the characters, but also, you know, these games are most well known for being co-op platformers. It's an interesting attempt at something very unique nonetheless, if a very clumsy one. Now we finally return to the MCU. Well, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is decanonized, but at the time it was the MCU. Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is a level adaptation of a bad show that aired on ABC to capitalize on the unending popularity the MCU had at the time of Age of Ultron, and would vaguely reference but never intertwine with the popular film series, with this DLC being an adaptation of the two-part Season 2 finale, SOS, with each section adapting one of the episodes. I have no idea what's meant to be going on plot-wise here, not even a little, and the roster is sheerly slightly different guys with guns. The first half seems to take place in an Asian-esque mutant sanctuary, which is unique visually at least, but I'm substantially less interested than in the prior DLC levels, which were basically teases for what characters would get movies in the near future. Finally, there's Ant-Man, an adaptation of the then very recent Ant-Man, which is pretty cool. It's a shame that The Hobbit never got the same treatment. The player who gets to be Ant-Man eats pretty good. There's lots of brief but unique segments where Ant-Man gets to crawl around inside of a computer or a door to pull a lever and smash some stuff or something, and a few unique puzzles like controlling the flow of wind to push Ant-Man around, but player 2 is stuck as Michael Pena the whole time, who's guy with a gun. I gotta give a decent passing grade to the level, even if they were too scared to fully spoil the movie and adapt the tiny fight that serves as that movie's highlight. But if I'm being honest, this is probably the strongest of the DLC levels, and one of the stronger levels in the game overall. Anyway, time to talk about a million MCU movies. Holy fuck, this is like half the video. Let's start at the start with Captain America: The First Avenger. Great movie. It's no secret why Joe Johnston directed this after The Rocketeer, which shares a lot of surface level similarities, but especially in the first half, this movie is genuinely great. Besides CGIing Chris Evans' face and manly voice onto the most cartoonishly tiny twink body ever, which, you know, bad decision. I think pretty much any solution other than that would have been better. It looks really bad, but pushing past that, I love the cold open of S.H.I.E.L.D. finding Cap in the ice. I love the cast. Chris Evans plays dorky kid with a heart of gold surprisingly well, and also hits all the emotional moments. Tommy Lee Jones is great as this sort of cynical general pushing against Captain America's naive optimism. Haley Atwell plays off of Captain America well, and Hugo Weaving is a great villain. I mean, he's Hugo Weaving, he plays maniacal very well. There's a certain level of cynicism the movie has that really balances well against Captain America where he is here. The US makes a super soldier and their first thought is to use him as a propaganda piece, having him play the lead in USO shows with the dancing showgirls to sell bonds, but he eventually does the right thing and pushes ahead into the impossible missions he was told not to do. It's fantastic character work, and I love how Tommy Lee Jones and the other cynical military people slowly come to admire his blind courage and optimism, only for it to come crashing down with Captain America's big sacrifice. And that final scene, I had a date. God, that's a hell of a gut punch. I do think the movie can be a tiny bit dull at points, especially in the middle. It ain't some huge superhero action fest, but I really appreciate how much Johnston and the other creatives put into Captain America as a person. Honestly, one of my favorite MCU movies in its own way, after this rewatch, very much like Iron Man 3. The Avengers is a movie that is a mixed bag, really. It's more carried by the novelty of being the first of its kind, this big payoff to the initial few movies, than it is, like, actually all that good. The movie definitely has that Marvel flatness and sterility, and the Joss Whedon that just happened millennial humor that would become more and more painful as the series went on. And also it has kind of severe structural issues that plague every act in different and unique ways. The first act suffers from the Avengers being the first of its kind. How much should we assume people saw the prior movies? The first act has to catch us up with where everyone is as we last saw them, but also who they are in case you've never seen them before. I guess we better have a scene where Black Widow and Hulk explain their backstories to each other. I guess we need a scene where Captain America remembers the literal previous movie that came out earlier this year. Better have Agent Coulson explain Iron Man's character to him himself as if he doesn't know. These disconnected catch-up vignettes are exhausting because nothing happens for a fairly substantial time in this 2.5 hour long movie. The second act is probably the strongest. Loki, despite being a rerun from the boring Thor movie, is a good villain for his ability to turn the budding supergroup against each other. Iron Man and Captain America fighting Thor is fun. The Hulk and a possessed Hawkeye ruining the helicarrier while everyone else scrambles to keep it in the air and stop the Hulk is fun, and their moments of conflict do a solid job of humanizing the whole cast, especially the reintroduced Hulk, now played by Mark Ruffalo. I've always kind of found the composition of the Avengers funny. You know, God, Robot Man who shoots lasers, Mutant of Anger who can level a city block and is borderline invincible. Then there's a guy on steroids who's about as strong as maybe 5 guys, a dude with a bow and a lady with a pistol. The movie tries really, really hard to make you forget how useless 2 of these people are, arguably 3, as they spend most of the climax running around the streets shooting pistols at aliens despite the US military's heavy weaponry doing no major damage. That kinda gets me to the third act where the movie just loses me entirely. I don't know what a Chitauri is or why they're here. I know they're like cartoon aliens that fly around on space motorcycles and space whales, but there's some weird missing information here. Thanos wants to bang Death. They retcon this later, but he tells some weird alien guy on this little rock to call up Loki on the space phone and tell him to build a gun that shoots a blue space laser to get the bug robot dudes to come down, and the bug robot dudes start destroying New York for no reason. Canonically, the Eternals saw this going on and said, nope, nothing we can do. Then, despite absolutely trouncing the bug robots, the Avengers are suddenly on the back foot because they need to be for the sake of the story, and the transparently evil S.H.I.E.L.D. Council of nameless evil business people are like, fuck it, let's nuke New York. So Iron Man drives the nuke to space and blows up the Chitauri mothership, which somehow kills them all, like when Kid Anakin blows up the donut ship in The Phantom Menace. Then Iron Man is still stuck in space, and Captain America's like, damn, that sucks, leave him up there, and shuts down the portal. Thankfully, Iron Man falls down in space without gravity and makes it back okay. What I'm getting at is, I don't know what a Chitauri is or why I should give a shit. Loki obviously can't physically beat the Avengers alone and needs to mess with them to make it happen, but him calling in the cartoon mob to have a big 40-minute action scene is just maybe not it. There's other weird shit in the third act, especially like when the Avengers circle up for their big money shot with the camera rotating around them, but then something happens and they all have to awkwardly shuffle pivot to all face in the same direction to look at it. Or Thor, for the 8th time in this franchise, and somehow this is only his second appearance, being like, come on Loki, it's been fun, but how about we just water under the bridge this one and end the apocalypse, okay? And then Loki stabs him. Like, who could have seen this coming? What I'm getting at is this movie's stuck between two extremes. Mindless slop where CGI superheroes fight CGI aliens, and boring setup. It briefly finds an interesting middle ground, then immediately starts to tilt to the other extreme. Movies rarely warrant 2.5 hours, and some trimming would have helped immensely, specifically in the recap section. It's not like it's out and out terrible, but it drags a lot and is mostly an interesting experiment in how the MCU should tie up its first big event movie. Iron Man 3 is my favorite MCU movie, and it's not even close. I'm not sure how surprised I am that Marvel fans hate it because it's mostly a real movie. Not a perfect one, but an interesting story about a guy who buries his anxieties in his job of, being a robot man, and who hurt people he barely knew to a point that they try to ruin his life. Iron Man 3 also benefits from being relatively low-key. There's not tons of mindless action like, frankly, half of these movies. There's not CGI hellscapes like the worst movie ever made, Ant-Man 3. That just happens are kept to a minimum. Tony gets to fuck up his life, befriend a charming little kid who looks up to him and is much less annoying than you'd expect a charming little kid to be. We get some moments where Tony has to use his true superpower, his ingenuity, to fight instead of his robot suits. I like that the Mandarin is a hoax because I've never read the comic and it's a pretty fun twist on the whole scenario. Shane Black does his usual Christmas setting, which is comfy as hell. The plane scene is a fantastic action scene that's something other than two robots shooting each other with lasers, and the big dumb finale with 10,000 Iron Mans flying around killing people is both well earned and visually interesting with the constant perspective changes, situational switch-ups, locational variety. It's just so damn good, man. Maybe the one kind of awkward point of the movie is the voiceover. I don't know, it's not bad, but it's used just sparsely enough to be kind of jarring when it stops and starts again. I'm a big fan of this movie. Increasingly beyond this point, Marvel would stamp out directors that had a vision like Shane Black. He's not like Steven Spielberg or John Carpenter, but he has a style that shines through while fitting Iron Man well, and it makes me sad to see directors molded into people who make Marvel movies by studio mandates, as opposed to directors with a vision who can match a character to their style. That's both a compliment and a good introduction to Thor: The Dark World, directed by Alan Taylor, the guy who directed Terminator Genisys and The Many Saints of Newark. Jesus. To be fair, he also did several episodes of The Sopranos, Rome, Mad Men, Game of Thrones, but a lot of that stuff predates this movie. Frankly, I'm not positive I've ever fully seen this movie before, watching it for this video. I remember the ugly sandpit battle and Padme and two broke girls shitting around in the parking garage. And I think that's about when I fell asleep in the theater. Although, maybe not though. As my eyes glazed over throughout watching this movie again, I began to vaguely recognize bits and pieces of it. It's just really, really unmemorable. To be fair, the movie does kind of improve in the back half when it becomes action slop. That's not really a defense of the movie, it goes from awful to mediocre. The action is dull, the characters are dull, the movie is poop brown for some reason, but the big monster man looks kinda cool, and so do all the other elf guys or whatever they're supposed to be. I don't know any of their names. The Reality Stone becomes like sparkly red tentacles, portals to other worlds open above Ingerlands. You know, there's still dumb shit. I mean, Loki fake sacrifices himself and is revealed to be alive in the span of like 3 minutes. The villain gets killed when Thor hits him with the hammer once, but it's kind of just ugly and mindless in the back half, where the first half is just a dreadful experience. Thor being sad in CGI Hell World, Padme being sad in the real life Hell World known as Britain, shitting around in a parking garage for some reason, you know, two broke girls, the titties one is doing some awful shtick. The romantic comedy Irish guy shows up, you know who I mean, the romantic comedy Irish guy. Loki is sad, like, holy fuck, nothing is going on for an hour of this fucking movie. It literally takes place in a parking garage. It's just miserable to slog through to get to a payoff of such sheer mediocrity. This was the first big blunder of the MCU, but would quickly be forgotten in the franchise's golden era and buried underneath a number of bangers. Captain America the Winter Soldier is neat, turning the MCU's naive golden boy into an enemy of the government and slowly waking up to the new ways wars are fought is pretty great. Great premise, done well. And it's directed by the Russo brothers. At one point, we all had a naive optimism about the Russo brothers, just like Captain America. These guys directed a bunch of Arrested Development and Community, and now they're doing this? How simple we truly were, given their recent output of The Gray Man and Electric State. They're good at producing the exact thing corporate wants, but are a disaster when left to their own devices, evidently. Anyways, it's good, but we already knew that. It isn't quite the gritty spy thriller people like to pretend it is. It's still a Captain America Disney Marvel movie, over the top, loud, and actiony, but it does make a solid attempt at playing it a little more straight and grounded. The mystery of the Winter Soldier is not very good in and of itself. I mean, the fact that the movie felt the need to reintroduce Bucky like 8 times before the Winter Soldier even shows up, and have Captain America be really sad about him constantly gives off a lot of signals as to the true nature of the assassin, but I do like the character and the conclusion of the character in this movie, as he breaks free of the brainwashing when Captain America stops fighting back, although his continued place in the series after this movie is kinda questionable, I think. The main plot is about Hydra taking over S.H.I.E.L.D. Turns out the shadowy and villainous looking S.H.I.E.L.D. Council didn't just look that way, they actually were evil. And their boss Robert Redford wants to use S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarriers to wipe out potential threats with laser precision based on that sniveling guy from the first movie who became a computer. He can predict who's gonna be a criminal in the future or something. It's elaborate and interesting, and Robert Redford makes a really good villain for holding all the cards in this situation, putting Captain America up against a threat that he can't necessarily just punch his way out of, and shattering his naive illusion of good guys and bad guys. It helps that the movie has pretty fun action and nice variety too. Nick Fury gets some vehicular combat, and he also dies for a second time in this franchise because he also fake died in the Avengers. The Falcon gets some aerial combat stuff, Black Widow fights a couple guys with some decent choreography, Captain America gets pushed around by the Winter Soldier a few times, there's the famous elevator sequence, which is all very fun. It's a shame that the movie kind of started that squeaky clean Marvel backlot CGI glow look that has made these movies so boring to look at. This movie really could have gone with a darker color palette and a lot less constructed artificialism. Although it kind of works for the story here, I suppose. I think it still could have looked a little nicer if they didn't overlight it. Point is, it's pretty good. It's a fun direction to take the naive Optimus and dump him in a scenario where his simple beliefs are shattered, and the action, fantastic. After all the build-up of Phase 2, we finally got Avengers Age of Ultron, which truthfully barely has anything to do with most of Phase 2 beyond it being the phase that introduced the Infinity Stones. In fact, it arguably just retcons the happy ending of Iron Man 3 and pretends it never happened. Joss Whedon returned to direct, and for me at the very least, but also I think for most people, it's where the movie started to get kind of annoying. And by kinda, I mean really. Age of Ultron isn't an atrocious movie, but hot damn is it fucking annoying. Everyone is that just happening? Every 10 seconds. Not just the Avengers, but Ultron too. No, I don't give a shit that Tony made him and he takes after him, it makes him goofy and lame, not intimidating and threatening when he's going, that just happened when he gets shot with a laser. It makes him fucking stupid. Quicksilver quips, Scarlet Witch quips, and also for some reason they had Elizabeth Olsen do like a horrible fake Russian accent that she never does in these movies again. Nobody ever just shuts the hell up. Just stop talking. Stop. You stop. Stop. Just happensing. Stop. It's a messy movie beyond that too. There's way too much going on between Ultron, Andy Serkis as Claw or whatever the guy with the cyber monocle, Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, but it does amount to some fairly fun stuff. Most of the Korea portion of the movie is pretty neat, with a cool train scene and a cool motorcycle scene. The Hulk versus Iron Man in the Hulkbuster stuff is very fun, if kind of filler that doesn't actually add much to the plot. And there are little glimmers of what could have been, like the Vision stuff in general, which has some interesting little philosophical bits where he's trying to figure out if he's a real person and what he wants to do with his life, and Ultron's first form that's significantly less annoying, plus that cute little scene where everyone tries to lift up Thor's hammer and Captain America almost succeeds. There are tiny little bits and pieces shoved in here that work really well. Some parts are clunky beyond the annoying stuff too. I mean, the final fight is kind of an overdone mess with all these whipping around a circular little room to show everyone doing things moments, which also happens to be an issue with the opening scene of the movie too, plus the fucking language. But generally, it's a fairly average follow-up to the first movie, in some ways better and in some ways worse. Much more exciting, much more annoying, and much less novel. It's also too long, but so was every fucking movie in 2015, so I can't really dock it for that. It's fairly watchable, but a bit exhausting. SOS is the two-part finale of Season 2 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D, a series I have never watched and almost certainly never will again, and pays off a however long a season of network television runs length of time storyline about S.H.I.E.L.D clashing with a group of they're Inhumans, with the main character Skye between them. On one side, the good guys who are co-workers at S.H.I.E.L.D, and on the other side, the bad guys led by her evil mother and misguided dad, Agent Dale Cooper. Also some guy without eyes who can teleport, has that power turned off by blue lights, and still somehow takes down Agent Coulson, Nick Fury's best guy, and Agent Coulson's two best guys. Also, Agent Coulson is alive again, but this show's non-canon as of like 3 months ago, so I'm not even going to pretend to explain how or why he is. Anyhow, Skye's evil mom and the eyeless man want crystals that turn people into rocks. That's like the plot. I guess the thing is, for a network television action show, it has decent production values, the cast is fairly good, the effects are a little bit limited but pretty functional and honestly impressive for network television. The no eye guy looks really cool, this needle lady looks passable, it looks really unsustainably expensive for network television, but it's still network television. It can't be that cool or exciting or look that good or have acting beyond slightly above average. And at 45 minutes an episode, it's a bit of a slog despite everything going on. To be fair, the payoff is more exciting if you crawled through the prior season, I'm sure, but it can't be that much better with context, right? Watching 2 out of context episodes of a mediocre series is about as satisfying as you might imagine, so I find it kind of hard to make a real judgment from this alone. Let's just move on. Ant-Man is the most interesting production story you could possibly attach to a boring Iron Man clone. Edgar Wright, man who makes good movies, usually, tried to make Ant-Man happen for years and years and years. Disney finally said, fine, we'll do it, and then dumped him for trying to make too good of a movie and hired the ultimate yes man and literal director of Yes Man, Peyton Reed, to make it into Small Iron Man. Yay. Despite that, it's a decent movie. I mean, let's be real, that writing credit Edgar Wright got is doing some heavy lifting. I'm gonna give all the credit to the good parts for him over the guy who made the worst movie ever. Even when the movie falls apart at the end, when it becomes an Iron Man clone antagonist battle, but with a shrinking problem instead of a freezing problem, it's decently fun, with cute gags about the scale of the final battle. And I mean, the first 80% of the movie is actually a lot of fun. Baskin-Robbins ad notwithstanding, the heist stuff is great, especially the final heist. Wacky, silly, fun. Paul Rudd is good, Michael Douglas is good, Lilly, besides having the most horrid haircut ever, is good. The sidekicks, including Michael Pena, are funny. I like Ant-Man's daughter as an emotional core and his growing friendship and respect with his ex-wife's new husband. There are times when it feels like a real Edgar Wright movie with little sprinkles of cringe here and there. I think part of my avoidance of this movie came from its really bad sequels, which kind of flavored this slightly generic but fun movie retroactively. I think it would have been a 10 out of 10 been if the post-credits scene had Evangeline Lilly dropping a "next time, baby" when she saw the Wasp costume and then being recast. But it is a pretty fun little adventure movie. Oh god, we're done. LEGO Marvel Avengers is decent. There's too many cutscenes and interruptions in levels, and the hub is reused from the last one. But there's a solid cast of characters with various abilities, a few good levels, and lots of just okay ones, because Avengers and Age of Ultron have a lot of setup. The bonus levels adapting Phase 2 movies and the DLC help a lot with their more condensed adaptations that don't feel nearly as stretched or fillery, even if I was forced to watch 2 episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I had fun playing it. I mean, they fixed up the flight controls some, which I guess I should have mentioned before, and finally made the open world a little more fun to explore. And the addition of the small open worlds were a pretty nice little addition to pad the runtime. And I mean, going around New York again was fun despite it being familiar. The game does feel like an afterthought forced by Disney, but it's a decent afterthought. It's certainly on the lower end of the LEGO game spectrum, where it really is just like, we need a LEGO Avengers thing done in like 6 months, reuse as much as you can, and they did. I certainly wouldn't put it above like the first LEGO Marvel, and I haven't played the second LEGO Marvel, but I'm gonna make an assumption. I hope the next LEGO Marvel colors outside the lines a little bit more, doesn't play it nearly as safe as this one did. But the game is a pretty decent adaptation of what was at the time the biggest thing to ever happen in movies, and it's really a shame that the same movie tie-in is probably why this game is slightly less accessible than the others, although honestly if you skip this one you're missing a lot less than if you skip almost any of the other ones.